Welcome back. This is part 2 of our overview of scholarly research in APA style. We're going to be going into some detail on how to use APA style both for references and citations in this presentation. The first thing we need to concern ourselves with is the actual formatting of your document. So that's things like the font size, the font style, the margins, double spacing, cover page, etc. So the easiest thing is just to give you guys an APA template that you can open, type into, and then submit. So I will be posting that on Blackboard for everybody to have access to. If you've used APA before, you may notice that it doesn't have a running head. We no longer need to actually use a running head for student papers. So APA used to require that, it doesn't anymore. So it's a little bit simplified in that regard. That takes care of the formatting. Now let's talk a little bit about the references. So this is basically a page at the end of your document. So it's the final page of the paper. You would place it separately. And it lists all of the sources that you used in your writing. You do not include any sources in your references page that you did not actually end up using in the paper, and you do not include any citations in your paper that are not referenced somewhere in your references page. So these two things always have to match. And this provides important information because it basically allows people reading your text to be able to find those sources for themselves. So they might be going through and thinking, oh, that's really interesting, I'd like to know more from this, Rogers article. They see it says Rogers, so then they could go down to your references page, look alphabetically for R for Rogers, and now they have all of the information that they need to find that source for themselves. So that's why the references list, it shouldn't be numbered or bulleted, it should be listed in alphabetical order. Now, what components do you actually need to include in each of the references on a reference page? That's not an easy question to answer because it depends on what kind of source you're including. So a reference for a book is not going to look exactly the same as a reference for a journal article or a reference for a website article, for example. So to get all the particulars for that, I have a document I'm calling the APA Quick Guide that I will be posting on Blackboard as well. And this is going to have for each type of source that you might be using an example reference and something letting you know what the components need to be for that particular type of source. So you will have that available, but for now we can go over the basics. You always are going to start with the author's name. It doesn't matter what kind of source you have. Usually it's going to be a person or multiple people, but sometimes it could be the name of an organization. So if you have any listed human authors' names, you're definitely using that. Let's say that the author is Mario Rodriguez. You're starting with a last name, Rodriguez, comma, and then just the first initial, M, with a little period next to it. If Mario has a middle name starting with A, then it's going to be M period, A period. So it would say Rodriguez, comma, M dot A dot, and then if you have more authors, you're going to do comma, next author's name in that same format, comma, next one, and last one. So that's how you do one author or multiple authors. But if you don't have a person's name, you're using the name of the organization. So that might be the World Health Organization. It might be the Center for Disease Control. So just make sure that you start with the author. The second thing is always going to be a date of publication. Again, this doesn't matter what type of source it is that you're using. So this is going to be a year that goes in parentheses. Most sources are going to have a year of publication. That includes books as well as journal articles. Website articles, sometimes there's a publication date available and sometimes not. If it's a reliable source, it's okay if you don't have the date, but you can't leave this blank. You have to put N.D. in parentheses, meaning no date. Then after the date of publication, you have to include the name of whatever it was that you read. So that might be the name of the book, the name of the journal article, the name of the website article. Sometimes these get italicized, sometimes they don't. It depends on what type of source you have. So again, follow the APA Quick Guide for that. Then if you do have an article and not a book, you're going to need also the name of whatever publication that article came from. So that could be the name of the scholarly journal. It could be the name of a newspaper, a magazine, etc. If it's a website article, though, you do not need the name of the website. The name of the website is already going to be in the URL anyway. So specifically, if you have a scholarly academic journal article. Aside from the name of the article, the name of the journal, you're also going to need a volume number and an issue number and a page range. So from what page to what page was this article found in within that publication. There is actually a way within the library databases, if that's where you're finding your scholarly articles, to find the APA reference for it and copy and paste it. Sometimes they have little mistakes that you need to adjust, but it's easier than starting from scratch. If you're not sure where to find that or you need some help, the librarian can help you with that. So feel free to pop into the library and get some guidance on how to do that as a little shortcut. So in any case, the APA Quick Guide will show you everything that you need there, so you could still do it from scratch if you need to. Also for journal articles, you're going to need what's called a DOI number. So that stands for Data Object Identifier. It's like the Social Security number of that article. And almost all the scholarly articles include one. And you're going to basically write it in as a URL. It'll say DOI somewhere within there. If that's not available, then you're copy and pasting the URL that you actually took the information from. Now for website articles, you don't have any DOIs, so in that case you are copy and pasting the URL. So these are the basics of references, but like I said, in the APA Quick Guide you can see examples specifically for each different type of source you might be using. Alright, so we're moving on now to talk about citations, and this is particularly important because this is where most students get tripped up with unintentional plagiarism. So when is it that you have to cite your sources? This is a helpful little visual here. You can ask yourself, have I used anybody else's words here? If the answer to that is yes, then you need to put quotation marks around those words, whether it's the whole sentence or just part of it, and then you need to include a citation for that sentence. Now, let's say the answer is no, I didn't use anybody else's words. I put it in my own words. Okay, great, but have you used another person's ideas? If the answer to that is yes, you may not need to put quotation marks around the words because you put it in your own words, but you do still need to include a citation. Why? Because this is not your original idea. You had to read something in order to have been able to say that in your paper. It wasn't your common knowledge from years ago. It's something that you read now and you're putting in your own words in the paper. That means that you need to include a citation. You're using somebody else's intellectual property. So anything that is quoted word for word is going to need quotation marks and a citation. Anything that is paraphrased in your own words is also going to need a citation. You do not use citations only if it's common knowledge information or if it's your original idea, an argument that you're making, an opinion that you have on something. So you're citing usually a lot more sentences than you think you're supposed to cite. Most students cite fewer sentences than they realize they need to be citing. Closely related to this is the question of where do we have to cite our sources. You have to cite at the end of any sentence that takes information from one of your sources. So with any quote, there has to be a citation. With any paraphrase, there should also be a citation. So you can't just at the end of the paragraph put a citation that says Smith 2012 and then say, oh yeah, there's stuff from Smith inside that paragraph. Then if your second sentence in that paragraph took information from Smith, suddenly that sentence is plagiarized. Even if it's in your own words, even if you put the citation at the end of the paragraph. Because there's no way for the reader to know that that second sentence also took information from there. So some students struggle with that idea because they think, well, now I have like 4 sentences back to back that all say Smith 2012, Smith 2012. Well, you probably shouldn't have that many sentences back to back from the same source. That's a different kind of problem because your research should be merged into your paper in such a way that it feels like a conversation between those sources. You shouldn't just be giving the summary of one source, then put that one away, now the summary of the second source, put that one away, and so forth. You should be taking from any source that is useful for that particular paragraph information that is going to work in that paragraph. So most of the time, you're going to have more than one source per paragraph, which is another reason that you don't just end up citing at the end of the paragraph. You cite per sentence. Now, if you have way too many sentences in a row that require citations, even if it's from different sources, you probably don't have enough of your own original thought in the paper. If the paper is an informative paper, that's okay. You're going to be citing practically everything because you're not supposed to have original thought. You're just being informative. You have to include everything from research. But if you're writing an argumentative paper, if you're proposing any ideas, opinions, and so forth, then you would be expected to have some original thought in there. How do we format our citations? It's a little bit different for quotes than it is for paraphrases. For quotes, we need 3 different elements. We need to include the author's name or author's names. Remember, that could be one person, multiple people, or it can be the name of an organization. And you need the year of publication. If there's no year, again, you're doing ND. And you need the page number. So you need to put P dot and then the number that you got it from. If there's no page number because it's a website article, then you're still going to need the paragraph number. This means that you literally count paragraphs, 1, 2, 3. I found it on paragraph 3, and then you write PARA as your abbreviation for paragraph, rather than P, which is your abbreviation for page, and then write 3 next to that. So these are the 3 things you need for a quote. Let's take a look at an example. Progress has recently been made in the earlier identification of children with autism spectrum disorder. That's all word for word. I have my quotation marks around it, and then I have a citation at the end. Parentheses. This source has 2 authors, Charman and Baird. Notice how I use the little ampersand symbol instead of writing out and inside my parentheses, comma, and then I put my year, 2008, comma, and then my page number, P.289. I close my parentheses, and then I put my period. Notice the period does not come at the end of the sentence, it comes at the end of the citation. That tells you that the citation is part of that sentence. And if I used another sentence that took information from Charman and Baird, I would need to put them in there again. That's one way to cite them at the end of the sentence. You could also cite them within the sentence. That's what the second example looks like. So let's look at that. Charman and Baird, 2008, noted that progress has recently been made in the early identification of children with autism spectrum disorder. So in this case, I have my authors as part of my sentence, so I have to spell out and then I have my year directly after the authors in parentheses. Wherever your authors are, your year has to always follow right after. And then I have my quote, but page or paragraph number is always going to come at the end. You never put that in the middle of your sentence. That's too much of an interruption within the sentence. So you can use option A, you can use option B. Normally what you're doing is a combination of those throughout your paper because it just depends on the flow of your writing, what sounds best there. The example B that I have here, Charman and Baird noted that could have also been according to Charman and Baird, or Charman and Baird concluded. There's a million ways to introduce the authors within your sentence. What about paraphrases? Now remember that you should be doing a lot more paraphrasing than quoting, and these citations are more simple. Just author and year. No page or paragraph number required. So for instance, autism spectrum disorder can now be detected earlier than before. Just Charman and Baird, 2008, your period, or Charman and Baird noted that, and then you include your paraphrase. So that one's pretty simple. Remember, if it was an organization, it would be the World Health Organization, 2008, noted that. Or the World Health Organization, parentheses, ND, if there was no date. So just keep in mind those rules always apply. It just depends on what kind of source you're looking at. What happens if you have 3 or more authors listed for that source? You do not need to list every single last name every single time. All you need to do is include the first person's name, and then you're using the words et al, that means and others in Latin. And yes, the al has a little period next to it. So for example, the study aimed to characterize infants with autism spectrum disorder less than 1 year of age. So let's say that this article was Rodriguez, Rogers, and Smith. That's 3 authors, so you don't need to list all 3. You just do Rodriguez et al, and then you follow the same rules, comma, year, and if it was a quote, comma, page number or paragraph number. Final thing to note here is that even though in the references you're including the author's last name, comma, first initial, middle initial, that is not necessary in the citations. In the citations, you're only including the last names. So Rodriguez and Smith, Rodriguez et al, Charman and Baird, you don't include ever the first or middle initials in your citations. So that's it. I know that APA is not the most exciting thing in the world, but it is necessary, and good luck with your writing.